All right, welcome back everybody to the fifth week here. Again, my name is Greg Suchy. I'm here with Harry Derbitsky. We're going to have another great conversation here about addiction and the three principles and how a new understanding of how we experience life can really give you freedom from a lot of a lot of past stuff. Harry has a story he'd like to start off with, and then we'll kind of take things from there. And just remember, I muted everybody, but if you have a question or comment, please feel free to unmute yourself or raise your hand. There's a little in the participants tab. You can click raise hand, and I'll keep an eye out for that. And then I'll call on you when there's a chance to fit you in, and let's have a great conversation. So, what do you have for us today, Harry?
Okay, I thought I would introduce what I want to do is have a discussion around this topic and this story. So, so there's obviously a connection between stress and addiction, and I'm not going to go into the semantics of that, but I had a very fascinating experience with this. Every Wednesday, I go into my daughter's class and I help her in her class. She's asked me to help her with what she calls the difficult students, which I quickly didn't do. I just quickly related to all the kids. And if I was going to be working with one, they would know I was trying to help them. I didn't like that. And I brought it, Krista Council and Jane Tucker created a book for schools. And in the book, I didn't like the book that much, I'll be honest, but I really, really liked the stories. Plus, I don't follow curriculum anyway, so it would be irrelevant to me. So a couple of weeks ago, I brought in a story that basically this little boy was afraid of a dragon underneath his bed. And then he, through his experience, he understood it was just a thought, and poof, the dragon disappeared. And so that was one of the stories. And then the next story was about being bullied, and if he took it one way, he ended up in a negative result, and he took it another way, he ended up in a positive result. So the direction of thought that we choose. And while we read that second story, I just sort of wondered about something. An idea popped in, and I said to the kids, well, what is stress? And this was very, very interesting. I want you guys to hear this. The kids didn't know. The only thing the kids were not experiencing in their awareness stress at all in their life. But they were very, very aware that the parents were experiencing stress, that the parents were talking about it and coming home and they were being stressed out. And it made my daughter and I looked at that, and we were quite shocked and surprised by that. So obviously, within the context of being a kid, stress is not part of their world. They have tension and stuff, but it appears to me that they drop it so quickly that it doesn't hang around. So it appears to me that stress is a learned behavioral pattern rather than a natural thing that we adults talk about continuously. And then once we experience the stress, we look for relief of the stress. So that's the topic. I just thought I wonder what you guys are think about that particular idea.
That's a great topic. So we'll just allow a little bit of silence here.
Yeah, okay. You open them all up and let them just...
Well, there's some background noise. That's why we keep people muted, to keep down the background noise. So anybody can unmute themselves or raise your hand. Let's just give a few moments of silence here for something to come up.
Bob's got an observation. No? Well, that was a fascinating opening topic. Well, what do you guys think about stress? Like like what would be something that pops into your mind that you notice? I think Marty has something.
Mm-hmm. I think, you know, we've changed so little in some ways since the beginning of, you know, since our first time here on the, you know, appearing on the planet as a species. And we name and rename things and think we know them better as a modern person than the people in the caveman era and every era after that. Stress is just a certain way of thinking, and it's always been with us, but because the psychologist named it stress, it's a special thing, you know, something to be really feared. It's just a normal way that we have of deluding ourselves in a way, you know, with our thinking. And it's nothing new. It's always been around. It's just we gave it this special name, stress, and now it's has special qualities to ruin our lives and whatever. So I always say, be careful what you buy into, what you think about something, and how you define it, because, and if you let someone else define it for you.
I think you hit the nail on the head there, Marty. The world has defined it for us, and we have followed the definition, rather than using our wisdom to deal with these momentary ups and downs that we see. It's obvious, like I've often used the image that a wise person isn't a person who stays high for a long period of time. What he is, he's a person that gets off the ground quickly. He doesn't hang around in the low spaces so long as normal people do. And it's with that, you know, that what I saw from that story was perhaps we have believed that hanging around is what is normal. But I have a feeling it's not so normal, you know, because I saw Sid. He would go up and down, but boy, he didn't stay down very long. You know, no matter what happened, he would drop it like a hot potato. And we have a tendency to, especially with what you're describing, I think you described it very, very well and very articulate. The world is defining it for us, and we have taken it as a definition. And it has become a super huge word out there. And obviously it's a big word in addiction, because, you know, every time I talk to people, that's what, you know, when they feel stress, that's when they look for relief of stress, you know, type of thing. So how about anybody, how does anyone else see that, and in relationship to addiction, or in relationship to your personal life? Because Greg and I are emphasizing your personal life is what we're talking about. We're not talking specifically about fixing a problem. We're talking about realigning yourself with your center, going home. And when you go home, your good feelings emanate. And from there, everything looks different, including the answers to your questions. So I put that pretty simply, but you know. Does anyone else? That's a great, very good, Marty. That was wonderful.
I think that stress is like a lot of these other things where it gets a definition and then people take it on and they say, I am stressed or something, or I am depressed or whatever. And once they take it on, it, you know, kind of has a, yeah, kind of they define themselves by it. And it's something that doesn't have to last. I mean, nobody is stressed. You know, that's not who they are at their core.
Yeah, they're not born stressed. Wow. I don't see too many babies stressed out, you know. If anything, I'm trying to get into their space. You know, they take me much higher than I am. So they're not stressed at all. except, maybe some physical discomfort, but it's very noticeable. We're an older crowd, more or less, and we have kids and grandkids, and it's very noticeable to me, especially being a grandfather, that my grandson, who's 2.5 years old, is taking me into higher levels of consciousness. I'm not taking him. I mean, we're doing it together, but he's taking me to places I like to go, and if I let him, type of thing. And that's the problem, is parents have a definition and they start defining it for the kids, and that's not healthy for the kid, because the kid's the wiser one. It's a little type of thing. So yeah, I guess that's so we have our natural feelings of being stressless, and would you say, Bob, that we're all stress is negative?
Oh, no. I mean, stress can be, it's in a way, it's like fear. Probably 99% of the time, all it does is hold us back, but every once in a while it's useful. The difference is knowing when it's useful and when it isn't. Same thing with fear. Yeah, it can be a motivator. But there are different feelings that come with, like, fear and stress, if it's something that should motivate you or something that holds you back, in my opinion anyway.
And it's also an indicator that there's something wrong in what you're thinking or believing, or not wrong, but you're on the wrong path if you want well-being.
Oh, so it's useful then. Mm-hmm. It is.
Can be.
I guess it defines boundaries for us, of where we shouldn't go and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a kind of a neat observation. Do we misinterpret stress? Like, Greg, let's say you're going into a big event or something like that, and say you were going to talk in front of 1,000 people, and you haven't done it before, would you define that as stress, or would you define that as a natural lift to bring your A game up?
I think the energy that comes, that we tend to call stress, is neutral. It's just energy. And it tends to come up at times when we're doing things that are new. So we're kind of conditioned, from our parents and friends and society that new things are scary, and especially public speaking. That's a big one. A lot of people are just so afraid of it, and they've never done it. So I took a speech class in college a couple semesters ago, a public speaking course, and it was really interesting to go through that with this understanding of the principles, and be able to get up in front of the class and have that feeling of what I would have in the past called like terrible stress and anxiety, and instead use it as an energy for the presentation, just to get, just to let it flow and let it guide me. And it always worked out for the better. And it didn't last very long. Once I started talking, getting into it, when I wasn't paying attention to it as something being negative, as something that's, I don't want it around, it actually changed from a feeling of, from that feeling of, I don't even want to call it anxiety, but that feeling in your chest when your chest gets a little tight, you're just, and it created this openness. And it really actually ended up helping me. So, I mean, it can go either way. I try not to label stuff like that anymore, because it's all energy.
I think that's dead on, Greg. Like, that's very profound. I want everybody in the room to understand what Greg just said. As I've grown in my whatever I do, called counseling or training or coaching or tutoring or whatever we call it, one of the problems I had in my evolution was I had a clear definition of what was right and wrong, what was positive and what was negative. And a lot of people in Salt Spring got mixed up in that because we started to define what was positive and negative. And that really held me back, because I would then go tell my kids and everybody else what was positive and negative. You could see right away that wouldn't do very good. You know, that would be like ego, me telling them what to think and all that stuff. But I got caught up in it. And at the core of that fault was the fact that I was uncomfortable with anything that made me uncomfortable. And so when I started to get into a deeper understanding, I had a few insights. I came to a point where I wasn't just interested in positive energy. I came to a point where people would take me into an uncomfortable place, and I was comfortable with it. And what would happen sitting in this uncomfortable place was the spirit, is what I call it, would come and bring it out into a positive direction. And us sitting in this negative place was where all the goodies was, and we sat there, and then the positive energy would come out, and it would be much deeper, much wiser, much more profound. And I found that to be an incredible evolution in my professional demeanor and my professional understanding of the three principles, because I was able to sit with people in what I wasn't defining anymore. And when Greg was talking about his experience, he could have defined it and then had a very uncomfortable talk, but he used it as the push. It's all energy. Every experience is perfect for you right now. Every experience. So you don't need to define it. And if you're going to interfere with your definitions because we're told we know, well, I got news for you. I don't know nothing. And then the more I don't know, the more comfortable I am with my spiritual being. If it's true for me, it's got to be true for you. And we feel this stress, and then we react into it. And it's the reaction, of course, that creates the emotional problems and the desires. Because once you release it, we all know that part of the story, it releases all our bad habits. And once our bad habits are released, well, you might as well just get into it because it's too late already. So does that make sense to you guys? Have you something more to say, Marty, or?
Yes, that's a wonderful way that you and Greg explained it, because it is neutral. It's our reaction to it. So in a way, anytime we're pushed out of our comfort zone or in a growth situation where we are insecure or, fearful, we're going to have, we would normally have that response, but we don't have to have that response. We don't have to go into stress if we're open and curious and willing.
And understand.
Understand that it's all neutral. We're assigning the emotional charge to it with our thinking.
One of the things that Sid brought to my attention was that truth disturbs the little mind. So if that's true, if you're talking on a higher level or a higher feeling, you're going to disturb the mind of the person on the lower level. And I got to, when I was teaching a certain subject, I got so that when the students got disturbed, because at first I was just looking for big smiles and, yeah, you're fantastic and all that stuff. When I was just starting, that's what I needed. But in reality, at the second level, I cared about what they were learning. And when they started to complain and all that stuff, oh, you're not doing this, and I started saying, oh, this is really great. They're learning now, and it changed everything because I could use that as a funnel to higher learning. Where before I would see it as an uncomfortable situation they were creating for me. When you take it off yourself and get into the objective feeling of life, the feeling that life is a very beautiful place, full of learning, it changes. And
it's a neutral environment.
yeah, there's a good word.
It is. And, you know, we have a hand up. I just want to say something real quick. I hear a lot of people complaining about Facebook being such a terrible thing. But my experience of Facebook is pretty amazing because it's a tool. It's neutral. And I choose the content that I see. I can just unfollow somebody and not see their rants or what they had for dinner. You know, it's that type of thing in life. I can just choose not to be around certain people who tend to carry a low mood with them, a low level of consciousness. I don't have to, and even if I'm around them, I don't have to let it affect me. My experience of everything is neutral until I put a thought on it and label it. Jeff has his hand up, so go ahead, Jeff.
Thanks. It's nice to be here again. In response to what Marty had just said, that stress is kind of in our perception. 4 years ago, a woman named Kelly McGonigal, who's not a three principles anything, had done some research on stress and did it's a 14-minute TED Talk. And she described people who believed that stress had no place in their life, that experienced stress actually led a shorter life. Whereas there's other people that just saw stress as a part of life, kind of like lifting weights, something that builds character and allows us to grow from it, saw stress as a positive thing. And so it really goes to, it's not SID, but it goes to our perception of stress. It largely defines our experience of stress.
Yeah, that's obviously true, you know, type of thing. Now, Lisa, when you listen to SID tapes and stuff, did you feel a relief of stress or anything like that? Or did you feel like a lift even thinking about stuff like that? Is that?
Oh, absolutely. You know, I got a 45-minute drive to work, and I thought I'd just listen to one of these sessions at a time. Then I listened to the other one. I find myself pulling into the garage at work and still listening to them. It almost puts you in a meditative state, still being alert while I'm driving, but had such a calming effect on me as if nothing could bother me. You know, I wish I could keep my earbuds in during the day when all of the demands start coming on and everybody wants something all at the same time. But for now, listening to them an hour and a half a day has really just put a dent in my stress level.
I'd like to say something on that. What you're experiencing is you. You're not actually experiencing SID. He's pointing to something and you're going there. I just wanted to point that out, that what we're talking about is not a place to get to. It's a place where we are. We're already there. We tend to do things that make it look like we're not there. We create this illusion in front of ourselves between us and our innate well-being. And this is, you know, this is important talking about addictions, because a lot of times that's when people reach out for that drug or that whatever their fix is when they feel stressed. They feel like something outside of them is creating this problem. And maybe if they take another thing outside of them and try to balance it, they won't feel it. And it usually works for a little while. But then the problem is that thing that you use to cover it up wears off. And it usually has negative side effects. You know, for me, it was a lot of missed work and you know, not taking care of things in life. But those outside things are that alchemy of trying to find that perfect mixture of here's this thing that appears to be stressing me out in life, and here's this other thing that appears to be relieving the stress. Maybe if I go have a cigarette, I won't have so much stress. They're both illusions. And that's why so many of us end up seeking help, because we don't know what else to do. We spend our whole lives trying to find that balance between these two things. And at some point, they just end up, there's just always the ups and downs. But when you learn to look at it as this is just a circumstance that's happening, and yes, it will have its consequences of maybe I'll lose money in this situation or whatever the deal is. But at our core, at our soul level, there's a part of us that cannot be injured. It can't be ruined. It can't be really touched by anything. And it's always there. We just create an illusion that it's not. So this whole, what we tend to talk about on these calls is really more about the process of learning to let go of our stories or beliefs. It's more that than it is finding something new.
And going to the spiritual space, and then we don't have to answer any questions. So as soon as we go into our go back inside, what happens is there are no problems anymore. And in that space is also this native word called healing. So whenever I'm inside, I'm already in the healing state that I need to be in to erase these erroneous thoughts. And in that space that Lisa was talking about, that's what Sid was pointing towards. It's a feeling, a spiritual feeling that answers all your questions. And that's why this room is hopeful. That's why this room has a different dynamic than any other addiction type of scenario, which are totally mired in the problems, is that the spiritual feeling that you have inside yourself that every human being has experienced is the answer. We were dealing with talking to different people, and really the level of help is not dictated by anything we're saying. The level of help is dictated by how let's say in this case, it's Greg, myself, and this other person collectively go to a higher state of consciousness. And as we go to that state of consciousness, that's the healing. And when Tanya was expressing herself last week with these feelings, she was expressing something from a feeling. Would you agree with that, Tanya?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I actually, the word flow is really resonating with me lately. And Greg had mentioned energy and flow. And for me, once I reach a certain level of consciousness in terms of understanding and awareness, I'm only one that can stop that flow through my thinking. And once I stop that flow is when stress happens. So I stop the flow of energy, of thought, of life, and then I grab onto it and I hold on, and it's mine now. And that's when I get anxious, or I get fearful, or I get stressed and all that stuff. So but I couldn't know this 6 months ago. Like, I couldn't do this 6 months ago. I had to reach a level of consciousness and where my own understanding could then, I now see it and I can now catch it earlier, so yeah.
Yeah, and you can now express love and joy.
Yes.
I mean, what's better than that? I mean, without that, life's a pain in the ass. Excuse the expression, but for me it is anyway, I was so happy. You just expressed joy and fulfillment, and it permeated through the room. And it shows what you have inside of you, which is, of course, what you like, the goodies. the same thing I have. A bad joke goes a long way, I always say, and I'm always at the head of the bad joke. But one person once said to me, Tanya, but your jokes aren't funny. I said, it's in the feeling. You've got to listen to the feeling of the joke, not the words themselves. Because in the words, they're not funny at all. I agree. Yeah. Oh, wrong way. Bad joke went in there. Come on out. Good. Okay. Okay. Good. That's great. So, is there anything more? This stress is a funny topic, so we might as well keep that. Yeah. How about you, Patty? What do you have to say? I don't know you, but maybe what would you have to say about what we're talking about? It's you know that if you say something, it's good for all of us.
I actually was thinking about this topic, and I feel like this is the perfect topic for me today. I feel like the last 12 hours, I got agitated over an event that occurred about 12 hours ago, and I have not been able to shake it. And I keep saying to myself, it's just my thinking. Nothing outside of me can make this, can cause me to feel this way. But I wasn't shaking it. But what I heard you guys just say is, that is in a way kind of denying my feeling. And instead of feeling it and just feeling it and going into it, I was just like, I don't like this feeling. I don't want to be in this space. So I guess I don't know. I don't have anything to add, but it never occurred to me to just go in the feeling and then feel it and then let it move through. Intellectually, I get it, but I couldn't figure out, or it didn't really dawn on me to do that. But it did dawn on me to say all the right things to myself. It's just my thinking. Thinking is an illusion.
Don't do that even.
It wasn't helping because it's 12 hours later and I haven't lifted it. It hasn't lifted yet. I don't have that beautiful feeling yet. And
it has lifted because you saw your fear. The problem with addiction or in any area is they're stifling all their feelings. They're using willpower to control their reality, and they're not going into all these incredible feelings they have, and so you're dealing with a tenth of the real person. And you know yourself as a woman and as a feeling human being, you want to feel all these incredible feelings you have, and it's only our fears and our thoughts that stop us. And you saw that. You saw that when you talked. I could see that. And that's when you don't judge it and you just go into the feeling of it, it disappears by itself. Because somebody used the word flow. I think Tanya, it is a flow, and it flows on by if you let it. It stops if you make it into a rock by your definition. And so you're being a feeling type of person. You're naturally sensitive to that type of scenario, and then you naturally get caught up in your label of that type of thing. And I'm telling you, I do the same thing, and I'm willing to bet that everybody in this room can 100% identify with your story, because it's exactly what we all experience. And then our puzzle is how do we not get tangled up in this now and again and again and again. So
I have a question for you, Patty. What did you have to do to make the stress show up?
Absolutely nothing.
So what do you think you might have to do to let it go away?
Okay, Greg.
I mean, it really is that simple.
Touche, I get it.
It's more of being the observer of that feeling.
Right.
When we get wrapped up in the feeling, thinking the feeling is me, that's when hangs on for a while. And it sometimes they do hang around for a while.
Yeah.
And that's okay. It's okay to be in that. It's entirely possible to have what we would label as negative feelings and still be okay. Believe it or not. I experienced this personally. I've had wonderful experiences with depression since I found out about the principle, since I've gotten a deeper understanding of it, where I can go through that as the observer and see the depression and just let it flow. And let myself go through whatever it is that I need to go through at that moment in time. Maybe I need to scream. Maybe I need to cry. Maybe I need to laugh. Whatever it is, just let it flow and just don't get attached to it. It's not you. It's like the analogy I've heard of the sky being unaffected by the weather. You are the sky. The weather's going to come through. And at times it'll look like the sun doesn't exist. Especially in Ohio, we have tons of cloudy days, but the sun's always there and the sky is always unaffected by the weather. As soon as the clouds clear, the sky goes back to its natural state of being. And that's really what this is about, just letting it flow. There's a natural flow to life, and sometimes it includes feelings we don't really care for.
And one of the things Greg's talking about, if you let it flow, Patty, with thinking, then it gets into the old psychological model where you're directing. What he's talking about is he's seeing it more from a inside objective state where he's watching this thing happening. He knows he's part of it. Like you are a part of this experience. But he's looking at it from a deeper state of mind, and from that deeper state of mind, it's objective and painless. It's actually, to use his word, enjoyable. So you're going through something on the outside, let's say a physical sickness or something, but on a deeper level, you're not agitating it. And when we don't agitate the experience, we're clear with what we're experiencing. And from that perspective, you know what to do. And the word is keep watching.
And the word flow is so indicative of life. Life is a dynamic process that is kaleidoscopic, constantly changing, and we get into trouble when we try to block that flow. Oh no, I'm not going there. I don't want to see that. I don't want to do that. I don't know how to do that. I've done that all my life. I took yoga and I'd start to get into a different level of consciousness, and if it was scary, I'd block it. It's like we can be our own worst enemies when we're unwilling to go with that flow and to be there with whatever is happening and be honest and open about it. That's what I love about the three principles. For a large part of my life, I hid from life and struggled with it and tried to control it. And then you realize there's no need. Just let go of the struggle and the trying to block and the trying to control. Beautiful thing.
Good question there, Patty. That was beautiful discussion. Hope it helped other people too. And you could feel that was a good topic to reach at a gentle level type of thing. And
does that make sense, Patty? Does that answer your question?
Yeah, but in the moment, I cannot shake it. It is visceral. My heart is shaking. My palms are sweaty.
So don't try to shake it. That's what we're trying to say is don't try to shake it. Just be there. Just be present for that experience. And
so I'm sitting in a restaurant, I get this feeling, I'm surrounded by people, I get this agitated sense, and I check out. I check out, and people can tell on my face that I've checked out.
You've already answered the solution. You're conscious of it. That's great.
That is the key. It's when you learn to just allow yourself to experience it without trying to shake it, without trying to change it, you'll end up having a better experience with it. And in my experience anyway, those types of things tend to happen less often as time goes on, as you get more comfortable with them. They don't pop up as much, and when they do, you'll actually find that they pass more quickly. And it's not because you're shaking them. It's not because you're getting rid of them. It's just the natural flow of things. You know, and when we try to shake it, it's like we're throwing a bunch of rocks in a river, and eventually it's going to change the course of the river, but it's a lot of work. It's a whole hell of a lot of work. We could just let the river flow and enjoy the view.
And one of the things, Patty, that I'd like you to be aware of is everything that you're experiencing in the moment, a lot of it is coming from before the moment. In other words, you're leading up to events that you're creating, although it doesn't appear that way. And in the native world, they call that first cause, singet at the origin. So if you are in a thing that looks like it's happening to you as you're describing, and then you feel defenseless, by the time it's happened, you're right, you have no power over that. It is a moment that you have to live through and exist, and you will go through it and pick up the lesson. But it's a continuum. So what if I'm living in a healthier state of mind up to that moment? That's the best I can do to, in a way, to be in the now, in the feeling of who I am in a relaxed state. The more relaxed I am before I do that, the easier that scenario is. And yes, it still may flare up, but what happens is it's because you're in a healthy state of mind before that, it doesn't have much power. And that's what I call acquiring personal power. You want to have more and more personal power so that you're without thinking about it, it doesn't dominate your perspective. And to say you don't know is the best place to be. You don't know really what the answer yet is, but you're getting your consciousness and your awareness is bringing you to that. So relax and let your own wisdom train you and teach you to have a gentler time with yourself, type of thing. And we all have to experience that. And perhaps there's a little insight waiting for you, around the corner that will really just show you exactly, the whole picture of that type of thing. And isn't that exciting to know there is that possibility?
Absolutely exciting to know. I'm like, bring it on.
That's the way I bring it on. That's a little.
And it's not only is it a possibility, it's a probability.
I'm waiting. I'm like, I am surrounded by 3 principles materials here. I'm like, I am the best student on the planet. And okay, I'm ready. Bring it on. And this is not even a half of it,
90% of the people who are sort of half in and they have that exact, when's it going to happen? And there was a moment, my past wife and I were in Salt Spring. We were living on Salt Spring. Everybody was so happy. And we weren't. We were fighting and complaining and it was obvious we were not living in the same world they were living in. And there was a talk at SIDS, and big fire and a big window facing the ocean, and he'd sit next to the fire and talk and stuff. And then everybody left, and my past wife and I stayed. And she especially, but me too, we started to cry. We're not getting it, everybody else is getting it, and we're just the same old fighting and this, and we're not even happy, and stuff. And he just went to my past wife, put his hand on, it will, dearie, it will. Just you wait. And sure enough, a week later, I had this enormous insight that changed my whole life and my whole vision of what life is. So there's my advice to you from Sid. It will, dearie, it will.
Okay, I'll imagine it.
No, don't do that. It ain't going to be that. Okay, sorry.
All right, we got Timothy. He's had his hand up for a little bit here. All right, you're unmuted.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yep.
Hello, everybody. Yeah, I typed what I wanted to say, but fear of failure is one of the most damaging stories I can make up. And I think it was Tanya. I know what you're talking about with like struggling with just being around people and kind of like a deer in the headlights kind of thing. And I'm starting to notice it, kind of like Greg was saying. I always, I in the past, I've had difficulties with just initiating conversations with people and all that. But I don't know. All I have is now. The future is going to be the present and now later, and the past really has no how you say value or effect, or really.
Have you noticed, like I noticed one thing, you're much calmer this week than you were last week. Have you noticed that in your life at all?
Yeah.
Is he gone? Or?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Just going to webinars, and like I went to Marty's 3 Principles meeting on Wednesday, and just there's this Facebook group, the Center for Substantial Change or something. They gave me a little info or a little thing to sign up for a webinar, and yeah, definitely. I feel it, man.
Keep doing it. Keep calming down. That's great. That's the level of growth or level of understanding. If you want a benchmark of whether you're growing or not, it's whether you're calming down. But really, up here, has this gotten incrementally quieter? If it's gotten incrementally quieter, you've grown a tremendous amount. So I can tell in you, Timothy, that you've quieted down, and that's, when we talked last time with Greg and I, we went into a collective consciousness state that was very, very peaceful, and you walked into that and experienced that, and that's the only place I can point you towards for healing. And healing isn't coping. Healing is total. Is like this, like I love that word healing. I mean, it's a balm. It's coming from the mother. The mother is healing the baby. It's coming in, and it's soothing, and it's giving you what you need. I need this. Oh yeah, and it allows us to resurface, reborn again, and that's the power of the mother. And I'm talking native spirituality now, so but that's what the native people understood that. They don't deal with problems, they deal with healing. And, and they're talking about this spiritual feeling. And the spiritual feeling is the one that, that has, it frees us from this form. This form is this physical world, and our image of it is a difficult thing. And one of the reasons I like Native people is because I can get out of the form. They take me into the mystical side of life. I like the mystical aspects of the principles. I don't so much like the psychological side. They are very valuable, but I don't emphasize them in my own awareness in the same way that a lot of people do. And I want to emphasize the spiritual nature of the principles are where all the goodies are. Sid was pointing to that more than anything else. He didn't talk psychological until the psychologists came around. Before that, it was all truth. That was the old truth. And that's what you're looking for. The three principles point you towards truth, not you're interested in memorizing the words of the three principles and what they mean and stuff. Because the meaning of the three principles is limitless. Nobody even understands what they are on an intellectual level. So you can't define the principles. That's why they're so effective and so powerful. They're who we are, and they express our emotional and intellectual and our physical world in a way that makes sense to us. Thank goodness we have those to allow us to make sense of this world and be aware of it. But we're interested in uncovering the unlimited formless energy of life, which is mind. And we are studying mind, the universality of mind. And without consciousness, we couldn't discover obviously couldn't be aware of what we were discovering. And then, of course, without the spiritual nature of thought, and this is the big difference between Sid and a lot of people teaching out there. A lot of people are teaching about thought. I give you that. And it's resonating with a lot of people, but I'm not into it. It's the spiritual nature of thought you're interested in, not the psychological nature of thought.
Hey, Harry, we have a question here. Patty asked, what do you mean by psychological?
Me?
Yeah, you were talking about it. Sid eventually kind of went into the psychological. What do you mean as far as...
Before form is spiritual. Anything that's created in this world, any physical, anything that is expressed is psychological. So before form, before anything is spiritual. That's a reality that you can't describe, but it exists. And Sid would say, what's here? What's here? And someone would say, zilch. And he said, no, there's molecules, there's a whole world here, but you can't see it. So before form, inside yourself, the spiritual nature of who you are, where everything comes from, everything is created and is everything, that is spiritual to me. Sid would say beyond time, space, and matter. He said that a lot, right? That's what he was talking about. So not time, space, matter. As soon as you add time, space, matter, you're in the psychological world. It's the creation of everything. Now, it's spiritual too, and it's all one. And so, but it's a spiritual psychology, because he's saying, go before the form, and there, everything is connected. So he's saying it's all one. But spiritual nature, I'll give you an example of the spiritual nature of thought, of an experience I had. I'm going to try and describe it. Now, you got to remember, it's indescribable. So that you guys got no chance of really knowing what I'm talking about. But here we go. I'm sitting, and it was like a sky. We'll call that mind, the sky. And from the sky came a thunderbolt. That was spiritual thought. The thunderbolt was everything, yet there was a sky. I can't explain it, any other. And it's a thunderbolt, and this thunderbolt is the spiritual side of thought. And that's who we are. That's everything that we are. Now, I experienced that, and I said, I don't understand it. I can't describe it to myself. And I said, that's good. For once in my life, I'm not going to try to describe it. And I didn't. And it resonated within me and changed me. Now, that's the best I can do in this metaphor. But thought is, everything is divine. It's coming from God or mind or whatever word you have. It's coming, and it's only what we do with it. And it keeps saying the right use of the principles or the wrong use of the principles. The right use of the principles is to let it flow, and the wrong use of the principles is to think a lot about it and take it into your own personal experience. But you have no choice. So obviously at one level, the spiritual nature of thought and the psychological nature of thought are one. So there's no difference. Does that make sense? No, it doesn't make sense to me either. I don't even know what I'm talking about.
Well, Harry, it kind of does. No, just a minute. In the context of Tim's comment, fear of failure is one of the most damaging stories I can make up. How would one go about failing? I was born a whole bunch of years ago, and inexorably, I'm drawn towards the end of my life, and I guess failure would be living forever. How does one go about failing, aside from against their own personal book of should, those things that they think life ought to bestow upon them, and our ideas about life don't constrain life. Life just is. And it seems to me that every word of philosophy I've ever read is an attempt to create a why or a belief system around life that actually constrains life. And it's backwards. It would be like trying to dam a river using water to create the dam. It just won't ever work.
That's pretty profound, actually. That actually defines what we're doing. You're right. That's actually dead on. If we understood at a higher level, see, that's the gift, guys. What you understand now is just the beginning. Everybody here is just babies, and comparing us to Sid, it's like night and day. We have so much more we can understand. But as we understand, these insights guide us into seeing more clearly, original thought, by the way, then we just automatically let that happen more. You could see right now, because of the state of the world, you could see that they don't understand, so they automatically have a lot of friction. And as they understand more, the people understand more, automatically it's a more cohesive, peaceful, less racial world. And so they're teaching us about what we have to do with our own world. Because really, guys, the biggest problem with addiction, you're too tough on yourself. No offense, but lighten up. We're in a kind of a mystery world in which we affect how we see life. Well, if that's the case, smarten up. And the way you smarten up is you do less. That doesn't make sense, but I can tell you, the more you relax with your life, the more you enjoy the moment. You know, when I started a chess club in my daughter's school, because I had a dream that I wanted to teach chess to the kids before I died. So I had this opportunity, and I wanted to teach them, like, the school is great and it's evolved quite a bit, but they're still teaching the people to do math. It's better than before when, but it's still, it's not flowing. It's not creative. It's so I wanted to, I said, well, I'll do chess and I'll get some kids and I'll teach them how to be creative, you know, flow with the stuff. And the first thing I noticed when I went into the thing was they didn't want to learn anything. They just wanted to have fun. They didn't want lessons. And they liked that I didn't have any rules. And they liked that I would just move from table to table. But the energy was so explosive. It was like they took me, like, it was incredible. I was like, I would have climbed an escalator and went 100 million floors above. That's life. There's only one thing stopping us from experiencing that escalator. And you know what that is. And it's such a joke because, you know, like when Tanya expressed all those feelings, that's inspirational for her. When I sat with these kids playing chess, that was inspirational for me. And it's the same feeling. It's always the same feeling. And so we learn to let life come to us. And all the people, the mystics and sages say, the more they get out of the way, the easier it is. And the same thing, you know, Chris and I have never met, and we've talked a little bit on Facebook, and I'm going to go visit him, by the way, in Denmark, just tidbit information. But we've already shared a feeling, right, Chris?
We have, yes.
And yet we've never talked, like, really. We've already shared a feeling. How does that work? Like, we've already know each other. There's a...
Well, you get this feeling that you know each other, even if you don't.
That's life.
Yeah, can I add something to what you said before?
Sure.
Well, I was just thinking that I really like this approach with the more mystical or the spiritual side of the principles. I've always felt that was a true way, and I've also, you know, been interested in some other ways of looking at it. And every time I do that, I get, you know, maybe a little bit agitated or start thinking too much, or, you know, I studied psychology, so. But the funny thing is, psychology never saved me, or did you know? It made me just think even more, in a way. And the wonderful thing is that when the good things happen in your life, you're actually not thinking. It's kind of happening. And the same thing with this. And some years ago, I was in hospital, very, very sick, could potentially die. And I had this experience of light and happiness and love all of a sudden in the middle of all the craziness of the hospital. And I loved the people working there and I loved everything that was alive. And I didn't know where this came from. It was just like something triggered, and I had this thought that God has humor. And I think there's something in humor and, you know, seeing the bright side or the funny side of this persona, whatever it is I am, we are. And really just having this experience of, wow, how did this ever become a problem? You know, even the worst of the worst, you know, I was really feeling sorry for myself, and all of a sudden I could see the funny side of it. This is really ridiculous. And another thing was, what happened was that I've always been a bit of a hypochondriac. You know, any kind of thing going on in my body, I would, oh, now I'm getting cancer, or something terrible would happen. I can also imagine all kinds of illnesses. And so when I really got sick, that stopped. It was really funny because this was just it. This was it. But at the same time, I realized that there's nothing. I can't really explain this, but in a way, there's nothing to be afraid of. So so that was my experience there. And that's certainly not a psychological, explanation or method or anything. It's more like, I could say that in a way I understand why you call it, is to use the word enlightenment, because sometimes I really felt that everything was lighter. I had this experience that colors and my senses and everything was lighter. My body was lighter. Everything was as if there was much more detail than I would usually. So some of my thinking had obviously fallen away. So I really love that way you're saying it, Harry. And I mean, I think Linda Quiring, her books are also pointing to this very basic spiritual truth that Sydney Banks actually came with. And thank you for reminding us of that.
Oh, my pleasure. I was the best man at Linda and Bill's wedding, so
Yeah.
Just a tidbit.
Beautiful.
A useless tidbit. Yeah. So, are there any more, or we must be getting?
Yep, so it seems like a really good place to stop it here. So definitely, I really appreciate everybody showing up. It was a great conversation. I enjoyed it. There's a good energy here today.
It's a calming energy. I liked it.
Yeah.
I hope the others did too. You look very relaxed, and the idea we have is to be a living room, eh? This is the idea, and the discussions, part of it. Very, very nice. And
Patty's face lightened up when you said the words "lighten up."
Yeah.
Just don't lose sight. Everybody, don't lose sight of the spiritual side of life. It doesn't have to be a part of any kind of dogma that you've ever experienced. So try not to be turned off when we talk about spiritual stuff. Don't be turned off by previous ideas of spiritual stuff. This is something completely different. It's universal. It's neutral. It's just beautiful. It's love.
And thank you for asking a bit more about that. It actually it let me investigate inside myself, and that is very rewarding. Thank you. Thank you for allowing me to investigate inside myself. I appreciate that.
Hello.
Who's
Hello.
that?
I don't know how to speak. Can anyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay, because I'm not sure what's going on with the gadget. I just got up, but I read something the other day about never mind trying to find consciousness, raise your level of consciousness. I mean, it's a sentence and it's a statement and it's sort of intellectual, but it is sort of a way to root in, which connects to your saying of lightening up. And I wrote something years ago when I was starting to write. It was creativity and spirituality running together like children playing. And I just wrote it, but I can't forget that because it's right on, eh?
Yeah, it is.
It encompasses all the sort of conversation about children and how they like to have fun, and you saying lightening up and lightening up with even the word spirituality. We don't want to take that one too seriously, even though it's vital. But I mean, I've got things going on in my life right now that if I don't keep it light, but I've gone to more of a stance of, I'll say letting God, but it's sort of like standing still and trusting everything will kind of go in the flow and not And it's sort of like patience and trust, but everything it's struggling, but there is a momentum. I see things are sort of changing. And I think Chris said something about the humor with God, and apparently we think we know what we're doing, but so maybe things are working out as they're supposed to be working out, with me kind of going along with it, not interfering or getting serious. So there I go. I said it.
Good for you. Yeah, way to go. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. To relax, Monica, is one of the neatest things in life.
And giving permission to that it's okay to relax. So lots of learning. That's good. Thank you.
Oh, good. Okay. Oops.
All right.
Got all these comments. What do you mean by say it? Oh yeah. Okay, I got it.
All right. Well, this looks like a great place to end it for this week, at least the recording part. Definitely thank you so much, everybody, for showing up and helping create this space, because it is all of us that's creating the space. It's not me. It's not Harry. Nobody here is an expert or a teacher. We're all in this thing together. And definitely appreciate everyone showing up. So I'm going to unmute everybody in case anybody wants to say goodbye or whatever. And we'll some of us will hang around afterward to chat. So.
You just want to get off of speaker view.
Bye.
Bye. See you later.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
I love it. Love you all.
Guys.
This has been delightful.